So today we are going to be painting some holiday gift tags. I've got 4 little examples here. We've got this little ornament, got this fun tag with multiple little ornaments. We've got a holly tag with some little berries and a little wreath. So I think we can do all 4 in the class. I think these are going to go pretty quick, but we'll do as many as we can. So I'm going to go through the list of supplies. I'm going to set these guys aside for now. So I've got some ribbon. So I've got some little 8-inch lengths of this real skinny ribbon. I find this works really, really well, and you can get it in these little spools like this. You could also use like a decorative string or yarn, of course. Red yarn looks really nice. So I don't feel like I have to stick to just red and green. Red and green looks nice, but I've also got some pink and some gray. So I say mix it up a little bit if you have other colors. For brushes today, I've got my number 8 round brush, and number 6 would be great as well. And these are going to be off to the right hand side when I'm not using them. I've got a number 1 brush. This is going to be handy for like this little wreath for some details. So if you have something of similar size, that would be great. I've got my number 2 pencil, and I like to use these little Paper Mate mechanical pencils, so I don't have to stop and sharpen my pencil. Just my preference. You can also use a regular drawing pencil. I've got my Sharpie pen. So this is a black waterproof fine tip felt tipped pen. For these, it doesn't necessarily need to be waterproof. I've got a couple here, and we're going to add the pen at the end when it's dried. So you don't necessarily have to have a waterproof pen, but we're going to add some pen detail to those too. I just like to, because I don't like for it to accidentally bleed or run. I've also got kneaded eraser here. I've got my spray bottle for my paints. I've got a ruler, so we're going to be using this to measure our tags. I've also got some metallic pens. You can use a metallic pen. This is optional for this little top or other little metallic details. You could just use paint too if you have that, or if you have like metallic watercolor paints, you could use those as well. So I didn't put that on the supply list because not everybody has these things, so they're entirely optional. Another option for metallic pens are these. I just got these sparkle pop pens, so I'll show you kind of what those look like on the paper. And speaking of paper, so you can either use some, multiple scraps of watercolor paper that you have. I am going to show you how to take your 8x10 sheet of paper. So I've got that here, and cut it down into 8 tags. I like to do that to kind of like batch them up if I need to make a whole bunch at one time. But I know, I also tend to accumulate a lot of these scraps from cutting my paper down. So whatever you have is totally fine. I've also got a couple circle making templates. So we're going to make circles on this ornament and this wreath. And so good one, especially for the wreath, it's about just the right size as a empty toilet paper tube. You can also use like a cap, or if you have a drawing compass, of course, you can make any size you want, or you can just freehand the circle, whatever works best for you. Optionally, you could use some watercolor pencils for things if you're not, for this one, we're just going to be painting directly on the tag, but if you like to draw these out first, you could use the watercolor pencils, or you could use it on the holly. Also, I just use a number 2 pencil myself on these because I go back with the pen and outline them. But if you don't want the pen detail, you could use your watercolor pencils, and then you won't have any pencil lines. So that's optional. And then pair of scissors. So we're going to be cutting out our tags. And paints. So I've got kind of a limited palette today. I'm using tube paints here in my palette. And gather these little guys again. I used, and you can use pretty much, you know, any colors you want on these. I'll tell you what I use. So I've got used my cool red for these. That's a permanent carmine, or if you have an alizarin crimson, or even if you have like cadmium red, if you want them to be more of a warm red, you could use that. Same thing for this little ornament here. I've used a combination of the permanent carmine and ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow. So pretty much our basic colors here. And then of course on these two, I've got greens. So got a sap green. I may have put a little bit of Viridian, and we could just mix a little bit of the sap green with some blue to get a little bit of blue green if you want to add some blue green in there. And then just straight up sap green. We could also use hooker's green for these on this holly, and then either your cadmium red or your cool red. I sort of gravitate towards the cool red, but feel free if you want a warmer red, the cadmium red is nice too. It's just got a little bit more orange in it. So those are the colors. Oh, I have my water container. It's up in the upper right-hand corner of my workspace. I've also got a roll of paper towels off to the side, and I have an old towel underneath my palette for washing and blotting, but you could also put some paper towels underneath, which I do that as well. I think that covers all the supplies. Any questions about those? Okay, so we're going to dig right in here. And I am going to show you how I do this on an 8x10 sheet. Of course, this could also be a 9x12 if you have a tablet of watercolor paper and it's not exactly, I'm going to move this to the side for now. 8x10. I think they usually come in like a 9x12 size. That's what I had, and I cut it down to this size. So I'm going to make 8 individual tabs or tags with this one sheet. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and the size that I have found works best for these tags, and of course you can make them larger or smaller if you like, is 2.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall. So I'm just going to measure in 2.5 inch increments going across from the bottom. So I've got 2.5, 5 inches, 7.5, and then if you do it horizontally, laying your watercolor sheet out horizontally, you should have exactly enough spaces for 4 cards. So I'm going to do the same thing at the top. Whoops, 2.5, not 2. And 5 inches and 7.5. And that'll give us 4 across. And then I'm just going to connect those dots with a line. I'm just going to make a light line. You can, if you have any pencil lines left, You can erase those later. So with this, I am using 140-pound cold press paper. This is actually a cheaper paper, which I tend to use for my cards and tags, unless I have leftover scraps from my good paper. So like these, if you have scraps, you can just measure the 2.5 by 3.5 on any of your scraps and cut them out. And I do try to use up my scraps, but if you want to batch up a whole bunch of tags, you need 8 right away. This is a good way to do it. So I'm going to turn my paper, and now I'm going to measure 3.5-inch increments. So 3.5 and 7 on both the top and the bottom here, and then just connect those lines. So this paper is Grumbacher watercolor paper. And it was very inexpensive. And it does have, definitely has like texture. Probably can't see that in the video, but has a texture on one side here, and it's really smooth on the other side. Which you could use to your advantage if you wanted a smooth side for more pen details, maybe. And then I just go ahead and cut these all out. I suppose, and I haven't tried this, I suppose you could paint the tags on here just like this in a grid and then cut them out. But sometimes I like to just be able to sort of like move them around when I'm painting them. So I think it's a little bit easier to have them pre-cut. And like I said, they don't have to be this size. This is just, I kind of played around with a bunch of different sizes, and it was sort of a good size as far as being able to actually paint something on it. So it wasn't too small, wasn't like kind of too big to go on a package or something. And what I'm going to do as we're going through the class, I'm going to show you how I batch them up. So I'm going to do 2 tags of each design at a time. But if I want to do a whole bunch, I just lay out like a whole bunch of one design. I'll just lay them out on my workspace here and do one element of each design on each tag at a time. Now, what I like to do, and this is optional also, I like to cut these little corners off. So if you want to do that, I just measure 1/2 inch from each side at the top, and then 1/2 inch down. And you can do this like on one tag and then use it as a template for your other tags. So then I just cut on a diagonal between those two marks. Like that. And then I take my other tags, instead of measuring all of them, I'll just use that as a template and cut those little corners off. You don't have to measure, but if I don't measure, mine end up being a little bit wonky. I'm just gonna say. Measuring is good for some things. Now, obviously, you guys don't need to make 8 cards today, but you'll have some. If you're using the full sheet, you'll have some extra. If you're using up your scraps, then have as many as you like. Oh, there is one other thing. Hole punch. Didn't mention that in the supplies. I suppose you don't have to have it. You could tape it on, but, and I do this sort of at the end, but you could do it at the start too, but you are going to need a hole punch if you want to use the ribbon on them. So you can either punch them out at the beginning or when you're done. I'm going to go ahead and punch mine now while you are finishing up preparing your tags. I'm shooting for like right at the bottom of where I put that corner. Basically like a ½ inch down. So you can see like that little thing is where the hole is going to be. Yeah. And I'm just eyeballing it to be about down to where that corner is cut off. That seems to work pretty good. Yeah, sometimes it's too far and sometimes it's too close to the top. Okay. So I am going to bring my paints back over here. And I'm going to give my paints a little spray with my spray bottle just to activate them a little bit. Like I said, if you have other colors you want to use, feel free. So I think we're going to start with this ornament. This is a fun one. These are all pretty easy to do. So Kind of makes it easy to make a whole bunch of them. Put our little example here. So for this one, we're just going to draw a circle and a little cap and then the hook at the top. So I'm going to use my pencil for this. And then whether you have, now my toilet paper tube is, it's crunched and I couldn't find any that weren't crunched. So you could just freehand it or you could use another template. I'm just going to use this cap. If you have a drawing compass, you can use that as well to make it any size you like. So I'm just going to use this cap, one of my tags here, and I'm going to trace it. And I'm going to do 2 at a time here. So I'm going to do this guy too. And then hold that up so you can see what I've got there. That one might be kind of big for this, but it's okay. This one might be a little bit smaller. I probably freehanded this circle on the sample one, so you could do that too. And then I'm just going to draw this little cap. So 2 little lines at the top here, like that, just sticking up from the top of that circle. And if you need to know, it's about not quite a 1/2 inch. It's more like a centimeter across. And then I'm going to draw just a little curved line at the top of that. And then I'm going to draw a line kind of going straight up from that and then curving around where I have the hole punch. If you don't have the hole punched yet, then you can curve it wherever you want it to go and then punch the hole later inside of that curve. I just made it like that. And we're going to use a wet and wet technique here. Now in this example, I used salt, and I don't think I added salt to the supply list, but if you have some, you could use it. And I don't see my salt anywhere. So I'm going to do the example without it, I think, unless I can find it real quick. Oh, there it is. It just gives that little bit of texture that you see here, but that's optional. Don't need to do it if you don't want to. And so we're going to be painting our plain water inside the circle first, and then we're just going to drop these colors into that water. So really simple wet and wet technique. So I'm just going to take my brush with my water, and I'm just painting that inside the circle. And I like to point my brush towards the pencil line, just to have more control over where the water is going. And now I want it fairly wet, not too puddly, if that's a word. And then I'm just going to drop those colors in there. And you can use, you know, you don't have to use 3 colors. You could use 2 colors if you wanted to. This one I used the 3. So maybe I'll do one with just 2 colors and one with 3 colors. So I'm going to start with the red. I've got my, oh, that's the wrong red. Permanent carmine here. And I'm just dipping my brush right into the paint. Well, because I want it to be pretty intense. And I'm just going to touch it to this water. And I kind of like to spread it around the side, the tip of my brush right up against that pencil line. I might add just a little bit more dark paint right here. And then, so this one's going to be 2 colors. I'm going to add the ultramarine blue. And here's a good time where it's kind of helpful to turn your card. So if you want to turn your card the other way, I'm just going to drop that ultramarine blue in there. And I'm just moving my brush along that pencil line. Add just a little tiny bit more here. So sort of dabbing it in there. And I like to leave some white space in the middle just to give that impression of having that reflection. There, I'll turn this guy back around. And then I'm just going to let it sit for a minute before I put that salt on it. I don't want it to be, oops, had some water on my brush. Blot that. I don't want it to be too wet when I put the salt on. It's got to kind of be not too wet and not too dry. So I'll just let that one sit while I do the second one. So again, just painting some clear water in the circle. And maybe I'll start with this cadmium yellow. If you have quinacridone gold, that's a really nice color to use for ornaments too. It's a little bit more earthy and golden. It's a really nice transparent color. So I've got the yellow, and then I'm going to add a bit of the red, maybe down here. And again, I'm just going along the edges. So I'm really just pointing my brush towards that pencil line along the edge there and letting the paint flow into the center of the ornament. I'm going to turn this the other direction to make it a little easier on myself. And I'm going to pick up some ultramarine blue down here. And I'm going to go along this other side here. Yeah, I'm just going to let those colors flow together. And I'll pick up just a little tiny bit of salt here, just a few little granules, and drop it onto that ornament up there. I'll do salt on the top one, and I'm going to leave this one alone, I think, without the salt. But I am going to add just a little more red to this one down here. I think it needs a little bit darker color while it's still wet. I'll hold this one up so you can see. I don't know if you can see the salt granules, but I just dropped a few in sort of down here. put these guys over here. We work on our other tags. Take another minute, and then we're going to move on to our next one. We're going to do this one next. This one's really fun. Very simple. We're going to be drawing some little circles and some lines and just really painting in these little ornaments and then adding some spatters. I think this is one of my favorite designs. And you could do multiple different colors also if you wanted to. Okay. So I'm going to start on this one. And I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to draw some little circles. So I'm not going to use any sort of template. For this one, I've got, looks like 6 little ornaments here, and I've got them at different heights and different sizes. So I've got one over here that's sort of maybe a third of the way up. I'm just going to draw a circle with my pencil there. We're going to come back in later and add the pen detail. Now you can also just start by drawing these with the pen. But if you want to have the option to move things, pencil is a little bit easier. So I've got a little small one up here, a little above it, and then I'm going to come down here maybe and add a bigger one. And then this one over here, kind of slightly above the first one that we drew. One thing to keep in mind, just make sure that you're going to have room for the string to go up, so you don't want to have these overlap too much. I have one overlapping here. I'm going to try to avoid that by drawing this guy down here. My circles are kind of messy. I might have to clean that one up. And then one up here. Now this one I left a little bit of room for your to from information. So I guess that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're making your tags. If you want to be able to write something on the front to leave room. Otherwise, you can always just write it on the back. So I'm just gonna draw my circles on this tag. And like I said, your circles can go different places than mine. Might be different sizes. We could do more or less. And then I'm going to draw those little caps on the top. So I'm just drawing a little tiny kind of square on the top of those little circles to make the cap. Very simple. And then I'm going to draw the lines or the strings that are holding them. But to do that, I'm going to turn my card sideways, because for me, it's easier to see whether my line is straight or not if I'm holding it sideways.
Hmm.
I'm gonna move my paints out of the way. Now, if you wanted to, you could use a ruler, but you don't have to. You want them to be perfectly straight. Or you can just eyeball it. We're going to be going over these with pen at the very end, so these don't have to be super perfect right now. So that's what my lines look like. This one's going to go through that little hole, and that's fine. If you have any that overlap the other ornaments, you can just make the line go behind the overlapping ornament. Now I'm going to preemptively grab a small piece of paper towel. We're going to be doing some spatters at the end of this one, and I'm going to have to clean my work surface a little bit with the paper towel. So I just grabbed that. Take another minute on the drawing piece, and I'll just explain these. I just painted directly inside of these little circles, and I left just a little tiny bit of white peeking out. So I just painted everything but one little kind of bit of white to make it look like it's light reflecting off of it. And I'm just going to use my number 8 brush. But if you feel more comfortable with a smaller brush and you have one, feel free to do that. And I did not paint the little caps in, but that's something you could go in at the very end and add some metallic detail. I see a circle here that I really just need to clean up before I start painting. That's a little bit better. So for these, I just used my permanent carmine, but I like I said, you could use your cadmium red or any other colors or multiple colors. I'm going to stick to this one color for mine. And I'm just dipping my brush in the paint. I want it to be pretty dark, so I'm not even really pulling it out into my mixing area, but you could if you wanted to. Now I'm just going to kind of use the tip of my brush here, and I like to paint around the edges of the circle first and then fill it in, and that gives me the opportunity to leave, I don't know if you can see that, but that little speck of white there for the reflection. And I'm aiming for sort of the top right hand corner for these to leave that little speck. So again, I'm just kind of going around the inside, the tip of my brush and the edge, and then just leaving that little speck of white there. So just like that. I'm going to do the second one down here. Don't worry too much if you go outside the lines of your little circles. That is happening to me. We're just going to clean that up a little bit with our pen. At the end, we're going to outline all of these in pen. Just like that. I'm going to set my other cards to the side. Our next step is going to be spatters, so I don't want to get any spatters on my other cards. So for the spatters, I just added some spatters of the red in the background to give it a little bit of texture and make it look like there are more ornaments back there in the background. So I'm going to add some water to my brush, and I just pulled a little bit of paint out into my mixing area. So the trick to spatters is to load your brush with kind of a watery mix of the color, and then kind of use the side of my brush to get it really loaded with this watery mix, and then I hold it over the painting. I'm holding my hand to the side so you can see how I hold it, and then I tap down my finger. So I'm just going to hold it over the top and tap down. And you have to use fairly firm tapping power. If you don't have it, you can use a pencil and tap down. You get a little bit different spatters, I think, and sometimes they can come back up at you. So whatever works for you. It will go all over your workspace, so just move things aside before you do that. So I'm going to wash my brush here and carefully pick these up. I'm just going to set them aside for a second, and I'm going to give my workspace a little bit of a spray here with my water and use that paper towel. Just clean this up a little bit. This is the only one that I did spatters on, but spatters are really fun. So if you want to add some to your other tags, could add a little bit of texture and fun. Just bring these guys over here while they dry. And we'll do the holly next. We'll take a few more minutes on your little ornaments there. So after these dry, and the larger ornaments, we'll go back and add pen detail and metallic pen if you'd like, if you have it. Now, if you don't have metallic pen, for this one, you can paint it in with a different color like a gray or something. That's totally fine. I suppose you could leave it white also. That'd be good. Okay, let's move on to the holly. So we've got, I did 3 leaves. Of course, you could use, do however many you want. I'm going to demonstrate 3 leaves and 3 little berries, very simple. And I'm going to actually draw the berries first. So I'm just going to draw 3 little circles. And I would say these are not completely in the middle. They're a little bit left of this, the center of the tag, a little bit below the center, kind of, if you were going to draw an X here, it's like right in that lower left-hand quadrant, the upper part of it. But if you wanted it right in the middle, that's fine too. I just like to make sure I leave enough room for my leaves here. And then, so I'm going to draw my berries down here on the second tag. And then for the leaves, what I like to do is draw that centered line first, and then the outside of the leaves. And we'll dry the line, and then we can erase it later, the pencil line. I also left a little bit of white space in there. You can see that I probably just avoided that pencil line and erased it later. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. So I like to draw the sort of the curve of the center line first, coming out from the berries. So I'm going to do that now. And that gives me kind of something to shoot for as far as how long that leaf is going to be and the placement and the movement of the leaf. So that's what my lines, just little curved lines, and you can make them as long or as short as you want, depending on the space in your tag, or if you want more leaves, you could add more. I left this bottom corner open to be able to write something in there. And like I said, if you don't want to bother with the pencil lines, you could use a watercolor pencil for this, for all parts of the leaves. I'm just going to use a regular pencil because I know I'm going to go over this with pen at the end. And then I'm going to draw the outside of these leaves on both sides. So kind of inwardly curving lines coming out to a point. And I just make 2 little points there. Really simple. I'll hold that up so you can see it. Like that. So I think drawing the center of the leaf makes it a little bit easier than trying to draw the outside first, for me anyway. And then we're just going to go ahead and paint right inside of these lines that we just drew. So I'm going to use my cool red again. You could also use cadmium red on this one if you wanted the berries to be a little bit more of a warm red. And I'm just dipping my brush right in the paint with a little bit of water because I want these to be pretty dark. And on this one, I did also leave that little bit of white, just like the little small ornaments. So, and if you want to use your smaller brush for this, if that's easier for you, by all means do that. I'm just using the tip of this brush and I'm going around the inside edge of the circle so that I can kind of work my way into the middle and leave that little white space. Do that again on this one. And like I said, if you go outside the lines, which I just did, don't worry about it too much. When we add the pen, it'll be fine. And then I'm going to paint inside of the leaves with my sap green. If you have hooker's green, that's a good one for leaves also. And I'm just adding a little bit of water to my paint here. And I'm going to use the same sort of technique where I go along the inside edges of those pencil lines. And then for the center, I'm going to paint almost up to that pencil line. So I'm going to hold that up so you can see. So I left a little gap between the paint and the pencil line for that little white space. Now on the other side, I'm going to paint right up to that pencil line. And then it won't be visible. And if there is any left over after it's dry, you can just erase it. So just using the tip of my brush here to paint that in. Hold that up so you can see what that looks like. Then I'm just going to go around, do the same technique on all these leaves. Pretty much just a wet on dry technique all the way around. And again, I'm painting almost up to that pencil line, but leaving a little bit of a gap there. And then on the other side, I can paint right up to it. And don't worry about the outside pencil lines on the edges of the leaves, because if you add the pen outline, it'll just cover up those pencil lines. So I'm just kind of using the tip of my brush, really holding my brush kind of straight up and down. And if your brush doesn't have a really good point, you could use a smaller brush to get into those little detailed areas. So I'll hold this up a little closer so you can see what that looks like. I'm just going to continue on to this tag over here. Just finish up this last leaf here. Okay, our wreath. Okay, so for the wreath, first thing we're going to do is get a watercolor pencil that is green. I can find one here. Green. Okay. And then we're going to take our circle making template, whichever you are using, and we're going to draw a circle with our green watercolor pencil. And I'm going to use a green pencil and a red pencil, or if you have something close to pink or red. And so I think what we'll do with this one is we're just going to take our watercolor pencil and we're going to just draw the outlines or the lines for these little leaves and berries around our circle. And then we're going to paint those in with our smaller brush. So I'm actually going to start with the berries first. So I did 3 groups of berries here. So I'm just going to draw in 3 different places, 3 circles. Now the way I did mine was I did 2 on the outside of the circle and one on the inside of the circle, just so I didn't have that green line going through one of them. So whatever works for you like that. I'm going to do that in 3 different places here. And maybe on one side, you do 1 on the outside and 2 on the inside. So I'll just hold that up so you can see what I've done there. And then I'm going to start just drawing in these little leaves, and these are not complicated at all. They're just little sort of teardrop shaped leaves and little lines. That's all there is to it. And I just kind of alternate as I go around. So right here, I'm just going to draw these little teardrop shaped leaves, and you can make them any shape you want. You can make them regular shaped leaves. I'll hold that up so you can see what that looks like. And then I'm just going to draw some simple lines that are curving away from that center line. So I'm just kind of alternating those as I go around the circle. So for this wreath, I did a little bit more of the lines, and then some more of the leaves, and then some more of the lines. So just some little lines here. It's like with these little tags, you don't have to be super detailed about it. You just need some shapes that kind of look like they could be leaves. So I might do a few more lines and then a few more little leaves. And then same thing, just going around. And the watercolor pencil makes it easier because when we go to paint this, it'll just blend in with the paint. So here's my finished one. And I'm going to do this same thing on my second tag here. I'm just going around and adding those leaves. There's that finished one. Hold it up so you can see it a little better. All right. So I'm going to bring my smaller brush. I've got a number one brush. If you have a number 2 or something similar, That's what I would recommend for this. Now, for some of these, you could just paint water right over the green. I'm going to start with the red berries, and I'm just going to I brought a little bit of this permanent carmine out into my mixing area and mixed it with some water. And I'm just going to paint in those berries, kind of like we did with the other ornaments. I'm just going to leave a little dot of white in there. So just like that. And I'm going to paint my berries first. And then I'll go around and paint my leaves. And that watercolor pencil will just blend right in. This is the only one that I didn't add any pen outlines. I didn't think it needed it, but you certainly could at the end. I think the watercolor pencil helps you get a little bit more precise. Here. And then I'm going to do kind of the same thing with my green. Like I said before, you could use just sap green, or you could add some blue in there. I'm going to start with the sap green and go around. I'm just adding a little bit of water to this. And I'm just going to fill in those little leaves. And you might have to dip your brush in the water a little bit more often with the smaller brush because it just doesn't hold as much. And I'm just painting those in. I'm going to do these teardrop shaped ones first. And then I'll go around and paint those little lines. Or I just touched one of the berries, so it's bleeding the red into the green, but that's okay. It's just going to make it more interesting on that little part. And I kind of go around and I start by painting the outline of the leaves and then fill in from there. when I was growing up, we had these coloring books that all you had to do is take a paintbrush. It was like a painting brush. Yeah, with some water and paint on it with the water in it. It was like this with the watercolor pencil where it activated the. So for the little lines, I'm just going to take some of this green. Now this is optional. You could just do it all in the same green. I'm just going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue just to make it a little bit of a blue green. But like I said, totally optional. Don't have to do that. I'm just going to paint over all of these little lines. And you could, like we were just talking about, you could just paint water on these little lines also, and that would be really enough color with the watercolor pencil. I'm just going to make mine a little bit darker than that. Actually, I'll demonstrate that on this last one. I'll just paint water over those lines so we can see what that looks like. Give it, I think, a nice kind of light green look. Yeah, that's kind of fun. So different ways to do it. Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay, I don't want to hurry you along too much, but I am going to go back to those other cards so we can finish those up. I'm just going to set this little wreath up here because we are done with that. So I'm going to start with the ornament. Now, if you did put salt on it, you might want to just brush that off. And to finish this one up, all I did, and I'm just going to demonstrate it on one of these, is to take my pen and outline. I outlined the whole thing. Outline this little hook up there. I like to turn the card as I go. I'm outlining so I can get better line. And then I'm going to take my metallic pens. I like silver, so I have these silver pens. This is called liquid chrome, and got these at Colors Art Supply, and they're great. Makes it super metallic. So it gives a little pop. And then with our little string ornaments, again, I'm just going to demonstrate on one of these. I just go and ink over these pencil lines. And if you have some pencil lines still showing, I would wait a few minutes after you add the ink and then just go back with your kneaded eraser and erase that. I like to make sure the ink is completely dry before I do that. I have smeared things, not waiting. And then I'm going to outline these little caps and then the ornaments themselves. Now, I didn't use any metallic on these in the past, but you could add a little dot if you have a small metallic pen. Which I think I do. Yes. I have this little tiny one. You could add that in there if you want. I don't know if it really needs it, but just for funs, I'll do that. So that's all there is to that one. And then our holly, same thing. I just outlined the berries with this pen. It gives me a chance to make the circle a little more round. And then optionally, outline these leaves with the pen. I think it just kind of helps define them a little bit more. Unless you were able to be super precise with your painting. Which is kind of hard with these little designs. I find the pen is kind of helpful for that. And you can add your to from if you want. And then of course, your ribbon. I think I mentioned this, but about an 8-inch length of ribbon works pretty good. So there we go. And I sometimes will sign on my name on the back, like my signature on the back. I guess it depends on how you want to use it. You know, if you want to write on the back, then you probably don't want to do that. Or just leave it unsigned. I guess it's kind of up to you. So those are our finished tags.